Hello, folks. Welcome back to the program. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. This video is intended to calm down folks who may be panicking over a news report that appears in News 24 today, the 3rd of March, 2025. The story is by Alex Mitchley. It's factual, but it's presented in a fashion that will cause panic amongst many South Africans who may be interested in the U.S. offer for refugee status. It likely does not apply to you. Pretty sure it doesn't. Let me explain. The title of the article is U.S. Cuts Funding to Civil Society Organizations Assisting Refugees in South Africa. Well, folks, if you're a refugee in South Africa right now, then this applies to you. But there are no South Africans who are refugees. Okay? If and when the program is completed and offered to South Africans, it's a unique situation of in-country refugee status. That's a rare but not unprecedented situation. The United States has taken in-country refugees in Cuba and also in Bosnia and Herzegovina and other places in the past because of the dire circumstances to those people and the peril their lives were in. Normally, a refugee, by legal definition, is someone who has fled from their country to a safe haven. For instance, Syrians flee to Turkey, or Sudanese flee from Darfur to Chad, Somalis from Somalia to Kenya. They become a refugee and normally register with the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees. That is not the case here. This is a situation of in-country refugee status, and it's simply a legal definition for people. So this funding cut has nothing to do with you. And here's what the article says. Just weeks after the United States invited Afrikaners to become refugees, the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration has cut off funding to civil society organizations providing services to refugees and asylum seekers in South Africa. That's true. But that funding was cut off on the 20th of January, not today. It was suspended on the 20th of January, and then last week it was cut permanently to South Africa. But they weren't the only place. So this is a story that's a week late announcing the fact that the letters have come out. So that's already misleading. And it's tied to the events of January 20th, which have been updated now. So there's another problem with this. Providing services to refugees and asylum seekers in South Africa. We're not currently providing any refugee or asylum seeker services to anyone in South Africa who's from South Africa. You're not a refugee. The February 7th program that President Trump announced doesn't exist yet. This is for people from Somalia who were flown to South Africa as refugees, or people who got to South Africa on their own and then later applied for asylum. Now, here's the thing. Why are we paying for refugees living in South Africa? Ask yourself that question. Organizations in South Africa provide services to assist refugees and asylum seekers who migrated to the southern tip of Africa have not been spared. Well, that's the whole point of this article, but they want to lead you to believe it has something to do with Afrikaners. Yasmin Raja, director of the KwaZulu-Natal-based RSS, said the organization had relied on the U.S. for a grant to provide services for vulnerable refugees and asylum seekers. So we, the American taxpayer, are paying for Africans who fled from other countries to go to South Africa. Why? Why? She said these particularly vulnerable migrants include the elderly, people with disabilities, and those suffering from terminal illnesses who have limited support networks with no one to look after them. Well, why isn't South Africa looking after them? Why aren't you paying for it? You offered them refugee status and or asylum in your country, so why aren't you paying for it? Now, the services offered courtesy grace au the U.S. taxpayer include counseling, safe spaces, and a small amount of money, a stipend to cover medication, transportation, and medical facilities, food, and housing. Jacob van Garderen, a human rights lawyer and director of public interest practice, told News 24 that the impact of the funding cuts would be devastating. However, he said perhaps less so in South Africa, where refugees and asylum seekers are not entirely dependent on humanitarian assistance for their survival, as the government allows integration so that migrants can get work and don't have to live in camps. So there you go. Unlike in Chad or Kenya or South Sudan or Uganda, refugees aren't living in camps. You can live wherever you want in South Africa. So this doesn't apply to the South Africans. The decision to cut aid to these organizations helping refugees and asylum seekers comes less than a month after the executive order by Trump potentially offering Afrikaners refugee resettlement in the U.S. And refugee resettlement in the U.S. has nothing to do with this story. Nothing to do with this story. This news story is intentionally misleading and therefore dishonest. It's intellectually dishonest. And it's going to cause a panic among some people who are interested in the asylum program. I'm not encouraging you to come here. I'm not discouraging you. That's not my place. That's a choice for you. I'm sad to see people have to leave South Africa if you feel the need. But I'm not going to lie to you and mislead you like this news report does. It's intentionally misleading. It's intended to provoke fear among South Africans. These programs do not apply to South Africans. They're for other people who've become refugees in South Africa, and the U.S. taxpayer is footing the bill for some African from wherever, Somalia or Darfur or wherever. And now they're in South Africa, and we're footing the bill. Why? Why isn't the African Union paying for it? Why isn't SADC paying for it? Why isn't South Africa paying for it? Why is the American taxpayer being burdened with debt that our grandchildren will be paying off 30 years from now at 3 times the amount we borrowed today to give money to feed and clothe refugees in South Africa? I think it's a fair question. Don't panic, South Africa. This has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. We don't know what's going to happen with the program in South Africa. It isn't formulated, and we have no guidance from the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security. When that comes out, then we'll know. Until then, it's all speculation. And running stories like this, intentionally misleading readers, is disgraceful. It's not journalism. It's sensationalism. It's yellow journalism. It's the sort of journalism that led Americans into the Spanish-American War after Remember the Maine. And that's unconscionable. Cheers.